Hi, my name's Mitch Cooper, and there's something I've noticed a while ago about a particular auteur, but haven't seen discussed as far as I'm aware. A director I have admired for quite a long time is that of writer-director Rian Johnson. He's probably most notoriously well known as the director of the 8th mainline Star Wars film, Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi. However, he's a filmmaker I have been aware of long before he was even announced on that project. Unknowingly, my first foray into Johnson's work was way back in the early 2010s with AMC's Breaking Bad, where he directed 3 episodes, 2 of which are a couple of my favourites, Fly from Season 3 and Ozymandias from Season 5. The first time he actually showed up on my radar, though, was with the 2012 time travel action film Looper. This was, in my opinion, one of the best films that came out that year, and the rest is history. I went back and watched his output from the 2000s and kept an eye on his career through the Star Wars period, and most recently with his genre-bending whodunit, Knives Out. What I have noticed in Rian Johnson's work is difficult to describe, and it doesn't seem to have a name, so I've obnoxiously called it the aversion to extraneous audience speculation. What I mean by this is Rian Johnson does not like to create any scenario in his films where the audience is thinking about elements of his story worlds that are irrelevant to the story he is trying to tell. There's a lot of different reasons why an audience might speculate on elements of a film's story world that aren't necessarily relevant to the story that's trying to be told. For example, just the genre of a time travel film beckons for its audience to speculate on the inner workings of the time travel mechanic at play. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Part of the reason why the Back to the Future trilogy works is that after it explains how the time travel works, it's allowed to just go and have fun with the mechanics. Rian Johnson, on the other hand, goes out of his way to blatantly ignore the mechanics of the time travel in Looper, in favour of focusing fully on the emotional journey of Joe. Early on in the film, he places a scene like this.
You gonna kill him?
Not if we can help it. Be too cataclysmic a change for the future. Now, what we'll do is dangerous in that regard, so not as dangerous as killing him. On top of which, a man from the future runs free long enough, you know, this time travel shit just fries your brain like an egg.
This is seemingly an attempt to quash an audience from thinking about the time travel mechanics at play, and just follow the emotional beats of the story. Whether it works or not is up to you, and it may feel like a cop-out. However, what's interesting is that Looper's time travel mechanics are actually quite rigorous, and Rian Johnson has laid them out extensively in interviews. However, in his own words...
Yeah, for me, with time travel movies especially, I've never not enjoyed a time travel movie because of a logical inconsistency that I found. If it's a great story and it pulls me through and I feel like I had a great time watching it and I get something out of it, I enjoyed the movie. And that's another one of those things where, it's do you spend, 20 seconds explaining that in the movie, or do you let it just be a question that people are asking after, and you gotta pick your battles.
There are other examples of this in Looper, such as making the decision to go through old Joe's entire history in a montage, instead of leaving it a mystery for the audiences, and also seemingly teasing the identity of this mysterious Rainmaker villain of the future throughout the entire film, for it to later turn out to actually be the emotional setup for Joe, and reverse the Rainmaker from ever happening.
So I changed it.
It's an entirely character-driven decision that turns out to not be extraneous speculation, as Joe is speculating the same thing as well. It's almost, in a way, making fun of extraneous audience speculation. Another way that a film can cause extraneous audience speculation is by simply being a sequel to a film that already generated a lot of questions in its construct. This is where Johnson's aversion to extraneous audience speculation has gotten him into hot water, whether you agree with his choices or not. The Last Jedi is full of instances of this tendency. In retrospect, the decision to have Rian Johnson direct a film that immediately follows a J.J. Abrams vehicle is an odd one, because they have almost direct opposite storytelling philosophies. Famously, J.J. Abrams' stories are built on extraneous audience speculation. It's a technique that he himself calls the mystery box technique. His belief being that presenting questions for an audience without answers, on its face, causes an audience to lean in. Using this technique in The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams begged 3 main questions from the audience without answers. Who are Rey's parents? Who is Supreme Leader Snoke? And why is Luke secluded on the island? Rian Johnson, with The Last Jedi, then ignored the speculative nature of these questions and either answered them immediately through the journey of its characters, or ignored them altogether in favour of servicing the story of the characters he deems more important to the story. The sequence where Rey falls into a cave that's concentrated with the dark side, and where she thinks she will find the answer to who her parents are, only to be given an answer she doesn't like, that she raised herself, is probably the most blatant example of Rian Johnson's aversion. Rey even laments afterwards that she's never felt so alone, even though she was given a reasonable and true answer, as we later find out her parents are in fact
nobody.
It's the speculation that caused her loneliness. This is her vice. Rian Johnson also answers the other 2 questions in a similar way. The identity of Supreme Leader Snoke is not revealed at all. However, his death is used as a character growth moment for the series' main antagonist, Kylo Ren, a character whose emotional arc Johnson clearly felt was more significant than the speculation of who Supreme Leader Snoke is. Even Luke's reason for being on the island is almost immediately answered in favour of a longer and more detailed character exploration of his philosophy towards the Jedi, myths and legends, and his own responsibility for Kylo Ren's downfall.
Because I was Luke Skywalker.
Finally, there's the previous audience expectation of a genre itself that can cause an audience to extraneously speculate, diverting the attention from the character story being told. Knives Out, in one fell swoop, eliminates this tendency in the whodunit genre by doing the unthinkable, seemingly revealing the whodunit within the first act. This fundamentally shifts the story from a speculation as to who did the murder, which makes the audience an omniscient viewer and speculator, to following how a character the audience cares about will evade discovery, which makes the audience a more personal participant in the narrative. Rian Johnson has talked about this in interview and how he loves the setup and aesthetic of whodunits, but not that they're stories that are built on audience speculation that lead to a big reveal, instead of being character-driven.
Well, as I started thinking about the genre, I mean, it's interesting. Hitchcock hated whodunits, famously, and his whole thing about whodunits was it's a big build-up to one big surprise at the end, which was a very cheap coin for him, narratively. And that's why he was all about suspense. He's like, give them the information early and make them lean forward in their chair. And I love whodunits, and I fundamentally agree with Hitchcock. So my idea approaching this was to kind of put the engine of a Hitchcock thriller in the middle of a whodunit. So hopefully we get all the great stuff we still love about whodunits. We get the questioning, we get kind of the old mansion and the eccentric family, all the suspects, and we get the great scene at the end where the detective does the denouement in the library and lays it all out. But in the middle of it, we kind of have this more suspense-driven Hitchcock thriller story that centers on Ana de Armas's character.
Rian Johnson clearly has an MO, and whether it has been successful or not, it has a clear purpose in creating more clarity in telling the stories he wants to. He might not even notice he does this. It might be entirely subconscious on his part, but it has made him one of the most unique, consistent, and successful storytellers in the modern age of Hollywood.